But the reality is we just can't seem to get the general public on track despite all the evidence. Now, this poll just came out a few weeks ago showing the embarrassing fact that only 70% of Americans believe climate change is real or happening. And climate change is listed as only our 14th most important concern. Again, climate change is just the first step. And then there's connecting that to food choice, and then connecting that to animal agriculture. And then finally, it's the connection to all other aspects of sustainability that we'll be talking about. So we have to get through this first step, which seems pretty challenging, especially with statements like this from one of our policy leaders in the United States. Yeah, this guy sounds like he has a pretty clear scientific approach to this subject as well as other subjects. And just when you think that he might be the only one in a powerful position with a large platform of influence with this bizarre view, then this guy comes along. It's embarrassing. And then there's this guy. There's just so many. So we have a few major hurdles to get over, don't we? But unfortunately, this might be the largest hurdle of all. Yeah, no offense, really no offense to those Republicans in the audience at all, but statements like this are not making things any easier for our environment. So I think it's time all Republicans start rallying around another much stronger leader who along with much better attributes, has some real environmental savvy. Yeah, there you go. I'm, of course, talking about this guy. He's your new leader. Well, current studies show that on average, we waste 30% of all food produced in the world. So reducing this waste is certainly important in our battle against climate change and loss of natural resources. However, we can reduce our food waste to zero and still be wasting massive amounts of resources and continuing on a path that furthers irreversible climate change if the food we're eating has anything to do with animal agriculture. Given the predictions of nearly every climate scientist in the world, our business as usual approach to climate change hasn't worked, and time just keeps ticking toward more irreversible damage. We simply can't continue focusing only on gas and oil. Therefore, it's time for us to get outside the box, take the right action, and to do it now. So a final summarizing look at solutions or prescriptions. This is what we have. Continue reducing our dependence on fossil fuels, sure, by advancing renewable energy sources, great ideas, but it'll take a few decades to be fully implemented. And we don't have that much time. In fact, we don't have any time. So another solution to climate change is we could stop eating animals today, right now. It doesn't take any time. And then we could begin the reforestation, regeneration of all that abused land. And that's the prescription to mitigate, not adapt to or be resilient to, but to mitigate climate change. Well, interspersed throughout our discussions are a few themes. One theme is how information about this particular subject has been suppressed, even mismanaged. So much so that objectives of many important meetings like those climate change conferences and other organizations, well, the objectives aren't being met. And that all begins with the words we use, I think. How clear are they? Are they conveying reality? Well, these are all food movements that you see that superficially seem to make sense. They make you feel as if you're going in the right direction because they're going away from factory farms. They're going away from processed foods. And that's got to be a good thing, right? Maybe not. Do any of these words mean sustainable or healthy? Many would want you to think so. How about the word humane? Does humane equal humane? Or does it equal sustainable for all involved? And if it does, which it doesn't, who is it that tries to define that word humane for all of us? Incredibly, there is one person that the USDA and every humane certified organization in the world relies on for that definition of humane. Only one person. And I've covered this strange and unfortunate issue extensively in one of my books. So then again, does humane even equal humane? And what does real food mean? I mean, I have issues with its precepts. Real food's still a very large food movement, especially on numerous college campuses today. And it's defined by being local, fair, sustainable, and humane. All four of those things. That sounds terrific. But this is terribly misleading. For instance, let's see, this little Aloha bar that you see here is not real food because it's not local, unless you live in Littleton, Colorado, where it's made, and worse, it's processed. But it does have pumpkin seed and other types of organic plant proteins, even some organic monk fruit, really put together quite beautifully well. But remember, it's not real food. It doesn't fit their definition. And let's see what else. Oh, yeah, this organically grown banana doesn't fit their definition either because it's not local. It was grown in Colombia. So unless you live in Bogota, it won't be real food. Whereas these other food items I'm about to show you, well, they're considered real food by this real food group movement. Yeah, over 19,000 chickens are killed every minute, every 60 seconds in our country, 19,000. I suppose that's pretty real. And if chicken, beef, pork, fish, or any other animal product is considered real food, what about these? Real food too? Sure. Why not? They come along with it, and these pathogens are all free. So unlike the banana or the Aloha bar, these poor souls are considered real food because they're local. And the real food people think they're sustainable, healthy, and humane, but they're not. They're none of those things other than being perhaps local. Therefore, the real food movement is flawed because the definitions they're using are flawed. Similar to every other food movement on this list, just because something's local doesn't at all mean that it's healthy or sustainable or humane. It doesn't even mean that it should be eaten. The only thing local means is that it's not very far from here. Buying local, in fact, has little to do with sustainability other than from an economic standpoint. It's a solid idea to help nearby farmers, and that's important, but in fact, transportation is only responsible for 4%, just 4% of all the fossil fuels used and greenhouse gases emitted in the entire food production process. It's much more relevant to view this by using a complete life cycle analysis. In 2019, the United Nations designated the next 10 years as a decade of family farming, which is a good thing for the 500 million small family farmers in the world, most of which have limited opportunities for improving their livelihood, and yet they produce over 80% of the world's food. But in terms of our health and the health of our environment, we must remember that it is the type of food being produced that matters most, not the size of the farm or the miles traveled. So by all means, support your local farmer markets, any one of the 8,700 throughout the United States, and support your local cooperatives. But it has to be plant-based in order to make good sense for our planet. And here's a new animal agricultural movement that's gaining momentum called Climate Smart. It's a nice thought, but given the global warming predicament we're in, shouldn't we be growing and eating only plant-based foods, which would then make this food movement the climate smartest? Yeah, I mean, we all want to be smart, but who wouldn't want to be the smartest? Well, the most recent food movement in the United States and Canada and in Europe that's gaining considerable traction is this one, to simply eat less meat. Or now it's being called a plant-forward diet. But it's the same thing, same goal of eating less meat. So let's see. The logic in this food movement is if you recognize you're doing something that's wrong, hurtful, and frankly unnecessary, hey, let's just continue doing that wrong, hurtful, unnecessary thing a few less times each day. Yeah, that makes sense somewhere, doesn't it? And despite what the United Nations and other gold standard organizations are promoting, this sustainability issue will not be solved by advocating eating less meat because that approach is subjective, it's inconsistent with the magnitude and the urgency of the problem, and it perpetuates irresponsibility with every bite taken. Also, unfortunately, it mistakenly shifts the focus to seafood, which, as we all know, is not really meat, right? Again, it all begins with the words we use. are they conveying reality? Well, this represents a food term that's constantly over-focused on and used improperly. It's a protein, perhaps a rudimentary protein. It doesn't have all the secondary and tertiary characteristics, but nevertheless, it's still a protein. So when you're thinking about eating protein, if that's a priority of yours, then this is what you should be thinking about. As in, I need to get my protein today. Protein is still not the little buddy looking over my shoulder here. No, that's still my research assistant. Seems pretty obvious. And what about this couples therapy session? I mean, they're still together, but they're having difficulties still because one of them is constantly being called protein. And it's not her name. And she makes it very clear that she doesn't like it one bit. She's complaining to everybody. They're calling me protein, and I want you to do something about it. Well, I'm trying. Protein is also not the guy on the left here, and yet that's what people are calling protein, aren't they? The guy on the left with the overzealous smooch and the excessive amount of saliva. I mean, he's a cow. He shouldn't be called protein. He shouldn't be called protein any more than the guy on the right, and yet we do. In fact, his name is Plato.